May the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. I like to finish my sermons with questions, and I may do that today, but I'm going to start this sermon with a question too. My question is this: have you ever taken on a task that is so big, so huge, so monumental that you just had to take a step back and ponder how you're ever going to accomplish that entire task? How you're going to finish it. Seminary was like that for me. When I started, they handed me an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with 2 columns full of classes that I was going to be taking, and I was only clicking them off 3 or 4 at a time. So that first couple semesters, it looked like a never-ending stream of classes I was going to be taking. And then I realized building houses for me was a lot like that too. We'd spend months drawing up plans, getting through permitting, preparing a job site just to pour the foundation, and that's when the visible construction started and everything started to happen. There's so many things we had to do. Sometimes it was a little hard to look at that slab of concrete and picture a house on top of it. I'm sure you've had that same experience in your life as well. I'm not that much different than anybody else. Most of us have had that experience where someone says you don't eat an elephant at one time. You eat it one bite at a time, one small piece. And as I was reading through this gospel section, it was clear to me that I think Jesus probably had that same experience that day. Verses 36 through 38 from our gospel say this: when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into this harvest." So what we have in this story is Jesus is now fully engaged in his earthly ministry. He's traveling from town to town, and he's confronted with this endless stream of people that need something from him. If you've been watching the miniseries The Chosen, there's one episode that captured this very well. Jesus was doing ministry from morning till dark, with this endless line of people coming down to him to receive from him. What we know from the scriptures is that people were coming to Jesus because they were hurting for a number of reasons. Some of them had diseases and afflictions. Some of them were hurting because their religion had left them hopeless. But the gospel says something astounding. It says Jesus looked on them and had compassion. See, Jesus had this incredible drive to serve them, to find ways of easing their suffering, or at least walking through their suffering with them, being present for them. And we know that the Pharisees weren't doing, most of the Pharisees weren't doing that. They were too busy finding ways that people were breaking the law to ever have the time to alleviate any of the suffering. And the Romans were not a very nice people to the Jews of the time. The Romans were interested in money and power, so they just wanted the taxes, and they wanted good, quiet citizens. So what Jesus is confronted with is this sea of humanity with no direction and no hope. So this leads Jesus to look upon them with great love and great compassion. And then he makes that statement: the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And I would say, at this point in time in his ministry, the harvest was plentiful and the laborer was one. And what we'll find out in the upcoming verses is that he would appoint his disciples and apostles to go out and do the work he was already doing. But at this point, he was a lone man. And this can be a lot like what we see in the world today. most of the people you know or you bump into during the day, they're suffering from something, some sort of affliction. They're going through something, or they just got through something, or maybe they're getting ready to go through something. And more than a few people, if you talk to them in the world today, are going to tell you that they don't have a lot of hope for the future. Many people have given up hope of finding any relief from Christianity, usually from one or two reasons. First of all, the church has hurt them or let them down somehow. That does happen. But then again, the Steelers will let you down too. The point being that we're human. We should extend grace and forgiveness when we're able to do that. But that is one reason why some people don't go to church. You ask them, they say, I don't go to church because of the people there. But the second one is the work of the devil. The world has led people to believe that the church is uncaring and unhelpful, that it's exclusive, that it's hateful. And that's a lie. It's a lie directly from Satan. And we know that. But those are the two things that you'll run into in a lot of the world today with de-churched people. And if you think about the people you've run into over the last week or so, how many of those people fall into one of those two categories? I don't go to church anymore because the church let me down, or I don't go to church because of its view or its stance on this political thing. I've seen a lot of people that are without hope, and I've seen quite a few that have animosity towards the church. It can be pretty heartbreaking when I think about it. If I spend time thinking about how many people are missing out on the peace of God because of those two reasons. The harvest is truly plentiful, but the laborers are few. Well, this story from the gospel is such a great story for us to look at this morning. So good, we looked at it 2 weeks in a row, for those of you that were paying attention. But if you look around the room today, you're going to see broken people. Every one of us in this room is broken somehow. But most everyone in this room, maybe even everyone in this room, is broken but relying upon the Lord to hold them together. Everybody in here can show you their scars. Everyone in here can tell you of their deepest regrets, or their most stinging hurts. But each person in here can also tell you that Jesus Christ makes them whole. And I use that word on purpose. I didn't say Jesus Christ made them whole. I said Jesus Christ makes them whole, because it's new every morning. Every morning we wake up, we have a choice. Do I live this day reacting out of my pain, or do I live this day reacting out of the love of Christ? That's our choice. Christianity has been aptly described as one beggar showing another beggar where to find food, but I think it can also be described as one patient taking another patient to the doctor. And it's the truth. Because each one of us has a role to play in the harvest. You have a role to play in the harvest. Have you found where your part is yet? Some people are called to be intercessors and pray for others and pray for one another in the church. Some people are called to preach and teach. Some people are called to help put together the worship service, to set the table. People are called to vacuum the floors at the church. Those are all different gifts and passions. We all have differing sets of gifts and passions, and you should know what yours are. But the truth is, there's one thing that every single one of us is called to. We are all called to be witnesses. And that can be scary, right? That idea of evangelism can be a difficult concept for people to handle. One of the biggest things that scares people in the church is this idea of evangelism. And the truth is, as I was preparing for this, I found 3 things that keep people from being purposeful in their witnessing to the world. There are more than 3, but these are the 3 that I decided to talk about today. First one being pain, the second one being fear, and the third one being feelings of inferiority. And the first one I want to look at is this concept of pain, because we all have pain. And pain can keep us from engaging the world with the love of Christ, often because we're having trouble seeing that love ourselves. I'm too damaged today to be able to share the love of Christ. I'm going through too much this day. And it happens. People go through some pretty traumatic things. There are people that have been severely hurt by this world. Parents that have abused them, friends and family that have betrayed them, sicknesses and diseases that have taken from them. I bet you every one of us in here has lost somebody because of cancer. The wounds we have from that are real. The wounds that we have from that are traumatic. But that's where the gospel comes in, and it says that Jesus looks upon those who are wounded and he has compassion. This means that Jesus looks at you in your pain and he loves you. The truth is, Jesus doesn't want anyone to try to ignore their pain. Pain is useful. Pain keeps us from hurting ourselves further sometimes. You don't see people with sprained ankles going out and trying to run a marathon. So Jesus doesn't want you to try to ignore your pain, but he does want to come with you within that pain and help you deal with it. And he wants to help you heal from that pain. The church is sometimes referred to as a hospital for sinners. So if you think about it, we're in a pretty good place right now to talk about healing. I don't know what you brought into this room today. I don't know what you're carrying. I know what some of you are carrying. I know some of your stories. I know some of the pain that some of you are in, but I don't know everything. But I do know this: Christ is calling you to lay down your burdens. He's calling you to receive his peace, and he's calling you to receive his abundant life. Now, I don't know about you, but too often I have found myself way too comfortable in my own suffering. I get so used to dealing with something that I forget that I don't need to deal with it anymore. I can lay it down at the cross. Sometimes I've neglected to come forward to receive the healing that Jesus wants me to receive. Sometimes I've neglected to go to the intercessors and say, pray for this for me. There's a Bible verse that says, you have not because you ask not. What are you carrying with you today? Is it time to lay it down? Because there's this great benefit to the church when people allow Christ to heal them. Because people who minister out of their scars are the most effective ministers. Who better to talk about addictions than somebody who's been freed from addiction? Who better to talk about the loss of a child than someone who's lost a child? So truth is, pain may sideline you for a season. It may sideline you for a time. But it is always God's desire to bring you through that pain. To bring you back to a place where you can once again be called to be his witness, especially in that scarred area. Is it time for you to lay something down? Well, today's a good day to do that. Well, that's the first deterrent to being a witness. The second one I want to look at is fear. People are afraid to talk about their faith. People are actually afraid of public speaking in general. There was a study that came out that ranked public speaking as a cause of fear higher than death. But the truth is about this world, it's become so volatile that this world has sought to demonize Jesus and his church for so long, and we see it growing in its intensity by leaps and bounds today. So this idea of sharing your faith can be pretty frightening when you don't know how the person in front of you is going to react. And you know what? In 20 years of ministry, 20 plus years, I've found that when I'm talking with somebody and I'm showing genuine interest in them, I'm listening to them, and I have an earnest desire for them to know the peace that I have. I've not had one single person respond with hate when I offer to pray for them. Now, it can happen. There's some truly awful people out there in the world. But it hasn't happened to me yet. It's not been my experience in the last 20 years. Most of the time when people aren't open to the gospel, what do? They shrug it off. Can I pray for you? Or they say no. Now, that one cracks me up. Can you imagine that? May I pray for your peace? No. Okay. But that part of the fear is only one part of the fear. Some people are also afraid to talk to others because they don't think they know enough. Or they're scared that someone's going to ask them a question that they don't know the answer to. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? God doesn't care. Maybe they're just terrified about speaking something they're passionate about, speaking about something they're passionate about. But I need you to know this one truth is that the best witnesses for the church are normal people like you and me. The major evangelists get a lot of headlines. But there are normal folks like you and me that are bringing other people to church in far greater numbers. People that are just out in the world trying to make it a better place, offering kindness and respect. The kindness and the respect that seeing someone who's made in the image of a loving God demands from us. They're looking to serve the least and the lost. And then there's this beautiful thing that sometimes happens. You're out there serving someone, and they ask you this question. They say, why are you doing this? I love that question. Why are you doing this here today? Because then we can turn around and simply say, I'm doing this because of what Jesus has done for me. That is evangelism in its purest form, my friends. Anyone can do it. That's not a hard sentence. I do this because of what Jesus did for me. But then there's that nagging question, but what if the next question they ask is one I can't answer? Well, the best answer to that one is, I'm not sure how to answer your question. All I can tell you is what I once was and what I am now. And if you really are interested in finding the answer to that question, I know someone who can help us. Friends, there's no shame in not knowing the answers to difficult questions. Theologians have been struggling with some of those questions for millennia. Since the 1st and 2nd century, they've been struggling with certain theological questions. But the truth is, you're not called to convince people that the gospel is the truth. That's not your job. That's the Holy Spirit's job, and he's much better at it. Your job is to be a witness to the power of Christ in the life of the believer. You're supposed to show what Jesus Christ can do in one life. So if you find yourself bound up in fear about talking about your faith, maybe pray to God that he gives you the opportunity to serve others in his name. And in the midst of that service, maybe pray to God that a conversation opens up. And then you can see what kind of conversations open up from there, because those are the conversations that make the difference. That's fear. The last obstacle to evangelism I want to look at goes hand in hand with fear. It's kind of fear, but it's a little different than what we've been talking about. The fear I've been talking about usually deals with external situations, us and someone else, us in a certain area. But inferiority, that deals with an internal struggle. And it goes back to where I started this sermon, looking around and seeing a task that's just so big that it paralyzes us. Maybe even keeps us from starting out. I've known a bunch of list makers in my life. People who make lists, to-do lists. And they spend a lot of time putting together this to-do list. Here's what I got to accomplish today. And they spend the first 2 hours making a list. Now, after 2 hours, that list is so big, they don't even know where to start. And pretty soon the whole day's gone. And the truth is, if you spend any time watching the news lately, and I hope you haven't spent a lot of time watching the news lately, but if you spend time in the news, or you drive through parts of Pittsburgh that are not more than 10, 15 miles from where we're standing right now, or where I'm standing, you're sitting, you get a sense of just how bad things are going in the world. It's a real train wreck in a lot of areas. People are afraid. People are afraid everywhere. They're afraid that they're not going to have enough money because the bloated talking head on the TV told them they're going to run out of money. They're afraid of drugs and murder at their doorstep. They see diseases and natural disasters. They see psychotic world leaders bent on causing war and strife. And they're afraid. And it's so widespread that it can be overwhelming. We look at it as the task of the church, and it looks overwhelming. I mean, it's easy for me to look at the neighborhoods around us and throw my hands up in dismay and go, what in the world can I do? How much difference can I really make in the midst of all this suffering? Well, it is our mission statement here at Reconciliation to impact our community with the gospel of Jesus Christ. But the truth is, for each one of us, it seems like there's 100 people working against us out there in the community, against the gospel, trying to undo what we're doing. But that can't give us reason to quit or to stop trying. That needs to be seen as a call to double our efforts, to continue to do what we're doing. You've probably all heard the story of the little girl that visited a beach right after a storm. Thousands of starfish washed up on the beach. And she runs down to the beach and she starts picking them up one by one and flinging them back into the ocean. And her mom looks at her and says, "Baby, there's no way you can save all those starfish." And she said, "Maybe not." She picked one up and threw it. She said, "But I saved that one." That's ministry. That's why we do what we do in the community. And that is a good reason to open yourself up to being a witness in this world. We may not be able to help everyone in this community, but we can start by being available to the person right in front of us at the moment. At the grocery store, at the park. Make yourself available to those people. That's something to pray for, isn't it, for each one of us? Lord, give me a desire to be present with the person that I meet today so they can see you in me. It's a great prayer. Friends, we may only be one small church, but we are one small church that wants to play our part in God's big plan. And you may see yourself as just one person out of a multitude, but you're one person that has been called to be part of the harvest. You just have to be able to say, here I am, Lord, send me. Amen.